statements. And we will start the day 2. Welcome to the Paris session 1B. It's suitable with the management for circular economy and deal with the cities. First, let's welcome the moderator, Chaudhry Mohanty, coordinator of environment program, UNCRD. Okay, Mohanty, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sabrina, for your kind introduction. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, participants, a warm welcome to the UNCRD session on sustainable waste management for circular economy and zero waste cities at the 17th annual session of the Global Forum on Human Settlements. At the outset, on behalf of UNCRD, Division for Sustainable Development Goals of UN DESA, I would like to convey our deep appreciation to the Secretariat of GFHS and all the co-organizers and supporting organizations. Specifically, we would like to recognize the leadership of Dr. Haifeng Lu, the Secretary General, and Christine Hay, the Deputy Secretary General. So please allow me to set the tone of the session before we get into our presentation and discussions. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the SDGs in particular not only call for equitable economic growth and prosperity, but also provide an important political implementation framework to implement 3R and resource efficiency to achieve resource security through circular economic development, and which is an alternative economic growth model, which is not at the expense of finite natural resources and our ecological assets. Rather, it is regenerative. Sustainable waste management, 3R, reduce, reuse, recycle, circular economy not only provide an important basis in achieving SDG 12, which is sustainable production and consumption, but also a meaningful synergies combinedly in our efforts to achieve other SDGs, such as the SDG 6 on clean water sanitation, SDG 13, climate change, SDG 11, safe, resilient, inclusive, sustainable cities and communities, and also SDG 14, life below water, among others. So we need to take into account few of the facts. Some of the reports say that in last 50 years, global use of materials have nearly quadrupled, outpacing the population growth. The world consumed 28.6 billion tons of materials in 1972, 54.9 billion tons in 2000, and in 2019, it surpassed 100 billion tons. And if business as usual prevails, the material use may increase between 170 and 184 billion tons by 2050. Rising water level, waste levels, accompanied by unsustainable production and consumption, which is SDG 12, with overall 90% of all materials extracted and used are wasted in some way. The rate of extraction has continued to threaten the planet's future and the human lives on it. On the other hand, only 8.6% make it back to the economy. So both rapid growth of resource use and economy in Asia Pacific, for example, which accounts for approximately 63% of the world's material use, the region is also witnessing diminishing resource efficiency, natural capital and ecological assets, shrinking forest, declining biodiversity, disappearing wetlands, water resources, among others. Waste is ultimately linked to most of the environmental problems, from biodiversity loss, global warming, and pollution to leakage of waste, various waste, plastics, toxic chemicals, and hazardous waste, heavy metals, into the natural ecosystem like our land, air, water, and ocean. The humanity currently faces triple crisis: climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss, which was echoed by many dignitaries in the official opening of this conference. Our UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has said, humanity is waging war on nature, and this is senseless and suicidal. So in this regard, among other objectives, the 2020 Global Forum on Human Settlements befittingly calls for resilient, carbon neutral, and nature positive urbanities and communities. The state of our natural resources are also determine the degree of resilience to issues like the climate change, increasing frequency and magnitude of the natural disaster, and health emergencies like COVID-19. So integration of 3R, resource efficiency, circular economy in all development sector, whether it is industry, public works, transport, agriculture, freshwater resources, forestry, fishery, tourism, trade and commerce, it is indispensable to achieve zero waste societies, thereby the objective of this conference 2022 Global Forum on Human Settlements. With this, I would like to invite our first presentation, which is in fact a video message. Unfortunately, he was unable to join with us, by Dr. Rene van Berkel, who is actually UNIDO representative in regional office in India. And the video is about means of empowering SMEs towards transitioning to the circular economy. So I would like to request secretaries, could you please put on the video message?
Thank you for the Global Forum for Settlements, for inviting the United Nations Environment Organization. I would like to speak about the empowering enterprises or SMEs towards the transition from circular economy on behalf of different initiatives highlighted. We are witnessing an evolving green agenda. Sustainable consumption production was launched in the conference in 2022 and dealt with aspects of food. And we moved in the 2000 an approach of sectors, economy, growth, and in green industry. Right now, we see that we need a transition from circularity. Both, particularly the circularity, underlying for climate change, biodiversity and nature, and accumulation of waste. So it's one approach to the key planetary crisis. It also changes that we will minimize, prevent waste and emissions. Right now we are in a situation that nothing less, there is no carbon emissions or zero waste efficient. I believe there's also a negative around circularity that we are ending up in a situation that romanticize recycling. And yes, recycling is not a the problems that we are facing. So we've seen that circularity has evolved, is reduced cycle. Then we have another few parts of our ultimately I believe that we have to get the economy recycling and being about because it's designed to be recovered and process will be we then speak about the circular economy, highlight that this is an economy, we don't pass products and materials several times used in value chain. So product design value is maintained and the waste and pollution is minimized. So we see the change of a linear with inclusion of circularity practices to become circular. I prefer to circular in economy is about innovation. These box that product materials and or business model, something like innovation, the life cycle, materials at the life product design at the level of manufacturing, use, end of life, enabled by market. Important part is driven by circularity strategies, for which we differentiate three different ones: circularity, you can also put it in a different way. Circularity deals with recovering not only in recycling one product in one cycle, but we need to think about what the cycle of food. So that opens opportunities in terms of waste and stuff. We also using waste in the factory and another of remanufacturing. We of course also have the opportunity to generate less waste, less material by efficiency. So relentless practice to use efficient production. All of this becomes also easier if we use more renewable.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Back into nature. So we see that
I'm sorry, Mohanty, I'm sorry to interrupt. My colleague was replay the video because of some problem with his computer. We was restart. I'm sorry for that.
Do we have extra time? Okay, please. I don't have any problem. So if secretariat allows,
Yeah,
go ahead.
because the voice is not a constant, so we replayed it. Okay, I'm sorry for the problem. Sorry.
Renewable materials, biomaterials, and biomimicry as a more copying of natural process in industrial products and services. If we look at enabling change, we've put very much emphasis that the agency for circular economy transition rests with firms, because firms have to ultimately manufacture goods and services that fit into the circular economy. So we need to really focus on how we can enable firms to change. In that sense, we at UNIDO, with some of the work of the Partnership for Action on the Green Economy page, we are emphasizing 6 levers to strengthen and shape agency of firms. So first of all is the industrial capability. So how good are firms at manufacturing? That is influenced by the competencies of entrepreneurs and employees, and it's enabled by technology and financing, and it's pushed by policy and pulled by markets. So that gives us a menu of changes. We put very much emphasis on industrial capability. So it's about manufacturing excellence, so being efficient in how you run a manufacturing plant, smart in terms of planning, preparing, do maintenance, and so on, but also adopting responsible business conduct or taking environment and social conditions serious in manufacturing. And it's also about competencies, entrepreneurship, so calculated risk-taking, initiative, leadership are important, and then the skills of the workforce, more on the green skills, whether it's installation of PV systems or greening, so somebody taking environmental considerations in being a painter or a welder. Then technology, we need to look at improving the supply of innovative and appropriate technologies, but also increasing the demand from firms, so helping firms to articulate what they actually need in terms of clean technology. And in terms of financing, a lot of emphasis is needed to improve the bankability of SMEs, much more than just providing credit. It is about the bankability of firms. In terms of government policy, there are 3 entry points. First of all, of course, we have the environmental policy for industrial sector. So that's our permitting systems, our extended producer responsibility and the related ones. And we have the green sector policy. So there are certain sectors that we want to grow. So it's policies aimed at developing a wind industry or EV sector in the country. And then also we need to look at the greening of the core sector policies, so industrial policy, employment policy, skilling and related policies, so that environmental considerations are mainstreamed into how we do industrial policy, HR policy and related. And then in terms of markets, a lot of emphasis is placed on the informed consumer choice, but it could be through eco-labeling and sustainable public procurement. There's also more emphasis on the voluntary sustainability standards, so international buyers enforcing environmental and sustainability standards on their suppliers. But a lot more can still be done on the market transformation. So we need to look at firms making investments. How can these investments be de-risked and be made cheaper through market interventions, and then not necessarily just only providing finance, but just making markets work. I come to a closing, and I would say that the circular economy can no longer be postponed or set aside as an environmental nice to have. The environmental factors are constraining the economy, so we need to address those. I believe that it's best to view circular economy as a framework for innovation driven by this circularity, so keeping things in motion, being efficient and using renewables. And this requires then competence and entrepreneurial SMEs and access to appropriate and affordable technology and financing. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope this was informative, and I would look forward to engaging further offline on some of the items mentioned in this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rene of UNIDO. And we listen the means of integrating circular economy in SMEs and the industry sector. Our next presenter is Professor Anthony Chiu, Distinguished Full Professor and Research Fellow, Gokan Wei College of Engineering in Manila, and he will be speaking on eco-cities towards zero waste societies. Professor Chiu, and you have maximum 7 minutes, maximum.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Mohanty. I just realized I have 7 minutes and not 10 minutes, so I'll be covering it. So my topic is on the eco-cities, but I will focus more on the ASEAN 10 economies as of 2021 towards a zero waste society through the SDG 12. We did a project on the ASEAN SCP framework, which I will be sharing with you, and some of the systemic approach based on actual project on the ground in Vietnam, a tourist, I would say tourism village city, turning into city and mega city like Metro Manila, and also based on the city level decoupling information published by the IRP. So in my team, we focus more on the sustainable consumption and production. We believe that this is an important measure that we can cut across to deal with several other SDGs. In our baseline studies, we scrutinize all the programs and all the programs and projects, as well as policies in our 10 economies in ASEAN as of 2021 through the sustainability frameworks, national development plan, national action plans, and also some SCP dedicated strategies. After a series of consultation with the stakeholders in the government, with the NGO and the research community, we have concluded through the APRCP roundtable on 3 important SCP priorities for the ASEAN region on the consumption of the natural resources, on the sustainable small and medium enterprises, the waste management and recycling, sustainable lifestyles, green growth, and public procurement as the main SCP tools. Now, they are directly involved in dealing with the eco-city strategy. A specific mention is to a need to prioritize a sustainable food value chain in the region and strengthen the institutional capacities to support such implementation. So on our first project back earlier days with UNIDO in the Hoi An City project, we work on the definition wherein eco-city can be defined as an urban area which manages to maintain during the development processes and ecological balance without depleting natural resources, with no environmental degradation, no harmful influence on the community health, and suitable for human living and working. Specifically, most of the economies in ASEAN are in the developing economies stage, so this is very practical. And we also believe that a healthy ecosystem is also the source of income for many tourism cities. In short, eco-city is a human settlement with the best living quality for its residents where natural environment is well respected. With that thought, we use a systems thinking here, working on the input, which are the main resources going into the system, but we look at the sufficiency issue, and we look at the metabolism issue, which is more on the efficiency. We also, which we call the throughput, when with the output as the product and services. What is important is the additional roundhood that we are creating here to create a circularity among the flow of the resources. Of course, at the economy-wide level, we use the material flow accounting, but at the city level, we also do a similar approach. A circular economy or circularity is very much can be viewed if we have a very good material flow accounting work, wherein we can see the linear flow is reduced and the circularity is enhanced. However, this example here is actually a substance flow focusing on aluminum, I believe. But we do have some data we received recently from even from the OECD and the EU, wherein we can see that the linear flow is still the thicker portion of the graph, and the linear or the circularity is still very weak. It goes down to several other non-technical issues and not just technical solutions. So we did also a study on the mega cities. What we do here is to really look at what are the major input. So we really need to focus on what are the material and energy sources and the proper appropriate land use that go into the system, which in this case is a city. Then the metabolism, which is in the middle, which we call the throughput, on what are the industries or what are the activities, commercial, residential activities happening, plus the infrastructure that is within the system. And finally, we want to reach a zero emission, which is an ideal case, but very much depending on what goes in and how they are processed through the metabolism of the city. So take, for example, the Hoi An City example. We tried a very low-hanging approach wherein we have 1 million tourists visiting the city, the resources that goes into the city, including energy for the hotel, water for the restaurants, etc. The residents and the commercial establishment are the main operations of the city, and the products are the GDP, the environmental status, and finally the satisfaction or the life well-being of the people. What we did is we look at the different various industries operations in the city, and then we try to look at how we can make full use of the resources that even comes out as a waste of one industry as an input to another industry, which mimic the industrial symbiotic or symbiosis approach in the early days on an existing infrastructure. In the city level decoupling, I believe that the four important issues we should look at are the four basic needs: the food, the clothing, the housing, and the mobility. And in the city level decoupling publication of the International Resource Panel first and second edition, or we have two publications released. They highlight that there are three major challenges. First is on the strategic intensification to create a network of high-density nodes interconnected with efficient and affordable transit, resource-efficient urbanism via infrastructure reconfigurations, especially on the buildings, and the entrepreneurial modes of urban governance to foster urban experimentation. In that case, we did a study of several megacities in the world, and Metro Manila was one of the studies here. We took in this basic profile information and come up with some conclusions, such as the wealth effects dominating efficiency of consumption operations. Building floor area explains correlation between electricity and urban area per capita, and high correlation of area per capita GDP as well as energy. So as a conclusion, four important observations issued by the city level decoupling publications are highlighted here. First, we have to look at the urban metabolisms, must inform strategic planning, and this involve even cities in the OECD countries in Asia Pacific on building efficiency, etc. Realign local building standards and planning protocol. This applies very much to developing countries wherein building codes are already obsolete and they need to revisit. And many metropolitan cities in Asia Pacific have already started revisiting and created the new building codes. Use the urban infrastructure investment as a catalyst and link the infrastructure and land use policy. Now, all these runs down to very much the Pokayoke, wherein we fix the choice editing of the consumers in the city so that energy and other resources are efficiently utilized. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Chiu. Thank you very much. Circular economy and life cycle thinking towards zero waste cities, zero waste communities is actually the DNA of a eco-city, which has tremendous implications towards achieving SDG 11. Thank you so much to be precisely within the time. So our next presenter, Dr. Heinz Schandl, as a senior science leader, CSIRO Environmental, Canberra, Australia. Heinz, your floor.
Hello, Mohanty, participants. It's very nice to see you. Thank you for Sabrina for sharing my slides, as you said you would. And before we start, I'd like to make 3 points that kind of relate to the topic of our symposium today, which is human settlements and sustainable cities. The low carbon and circular development cannot be detangled. They have to fit together. They need to be achieved at the same time. The city's perspective is going to be critical. Most of our industries sit in the cities. Cities have very long supply chains. They reach deep into the regional environments and into the global scale. And then thirdly, we talk about the transformational effort. So what we're trying to achieve here is not going to be easy. Let's keep that in mind. So for the next 6 minutes, I will talk about Australia's effort to move to a circular economy. And the next slide is very good to have, Sabrina. Thank you. And when you think about the material flows in the Australian context, what is very obvious is a very low circularity rate, only 3.5%. And also the circularity potential of the Australian economy is low. It sits at around 20%. And that has to do with the economic structure. The next slide shows the position of Australia in the global economy. We are a very large per capita resource extractor in Australia. Most people know that. But we are also the largest resource exporter to the rest of the world, be it metals or fossil fuels or agricultural products, beef, crops, both in total and in per capita values, we are the largest exporter. That has an imprint on our economy. On the next slide, we see Australia's emissions projections. What you see here on the left-hand side is the contribution of different sectors to the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. What you can see is that the electricity sector can actually decarbonize quite substantially, but all the other sectors are hard to decarbonize, which means that our baseline, the 32% below 2005 levels on which we currently sit, is actually not sufficient even to reach the Australian goal, which is now legislated of minus 43%. On the next slide, I show a few things that have happened since 2018. And there's a lot of text on some of the slides, which I thought I'll leave on because you will have time later on to go back to the slides and to have another look. So only in 2018, the waste policy in Australia starts to talk about the circular economy. But we've since made a lot of inroads in focusing on circular economy more directly, mostly at the state level. And in the context of the city deals. I think the city deals are a really interesting example from the Australian context where the 3 levels of government are working together to solve problems in urban settlements. A problem that we often have in cities is that the collaboration is very low and the influence of the national policymaking is often not received when we go to the city level. So with the city deals, there's actually a mechanism to repair that. On the next slide, you can see 3 very important developments in the Australian economy, which have happened, or in the policy landscape, which have happened just recently, a couple of months ago. In September, Australian government legislated a reduction target of 43% of net zero emissions by 2030, it should say, not 2050. I apologize. The Australian environment ministers committed to work with the private sector to design out waste and pollution, keep materials in use, and foster circular economy. And there's now a ministerial advisory group to the environment minister, advising the minister on the circular economy. On the next slide, we see the contribution of the built sector, the built environment, residential and commercial buildings, to the growth in material demand in Australia in 3 different scenarios. But most notably, by 2060, the amount of materials and embodied carbon emissions that we will need to replace buildings that need to be refurbished and for new buildings is very large. On the next slide. What we therefore need is metrics to measure the material and carbon intensity of the built environment. But we need to do this in a spatially explicit way. We need to know how do we fare at the block level, at the suburban level, at the city level, and then in the national context. That helps to identify opportunities for low carbon and circular solutions in housing, and then in adding on also in mobility, because the density of the city is actually very much related to the mobility demand. Let's go to the next slide. In 2019, CSIRO, together with the private sector, ran a study which we called the Australian National Outlook. We looked at two scenarios. If Australia continues on business as usual, we are going to focus a slow decline, a low economic development, a low real wages. Cities will continue to sprawl out in the way they do. We are not going to be able to deal with greenhouse gas emissions and climate change, and we are not achieving the circular economy. There is an outlook vision, which you see on the right-hand side, which depends on 5 crucial shifts. We go to the next slide. So these shifts include an industry, an urban, an energy, a land, and a culture shift. We need to refocus our industries on low carbon and circular processes and products. We need to look at our cities in a new way, shift to enable well-connected, affordable cities that offer more equal access to quality jobs, lifestyle, amenities, education, and services. We need to decarbonize the energy system, which is a massive effort because it requires the installation of renewable capacity, of a storage capacity, and new network connections. We also need to use land differently to produce a sustainable mix of food, fiber, and other uses from crops on the land. But most importantly, we are continuing to work on a culture shift. This brings me to the last slide, which is just a thank you. Please get in contact if you want to discuss this more. In a way, the Australian effort to transition to a net zero circular economy is very specific to Australia, but many of the things that we need to do are also shared with other countries. So we're happy to keep in conversation with you. Thank you very much, and back to you, Mohanty.
Thank you so much, Heinz, for sharing with us the Australian efforts in transitioning to a net zero circular economy. My sincere apology that these presentations are so rich, invaluable presentation. We are only allocating the 7 minutes because of the number of presentations. So
Never mind.
You can contact the presenters, and he has given, Heinz has kindly given his email contact for all the audience, those who are joining today. You can make use of the experience. The message is very clear. The low carbon and circular economy are two sides of a single coin, and waste management needs to be discussed more and more in the resource domain. We cannot discuss the entire waste management issue in the waste domain itself. So resource security is key to achieve all the SDGs. So we cannot leave the discussion of waste management in isolation, rather than we need to take into account the resource security. With this one, I would like to invite our next presenter, Dr. K. Kim Jem, Research Fellow, Nibongo Institute of Materials, is the Chinese Academy of Science, PR China. So he will be talking on bioplastics for our cleaner earth. So Dr. Jem.
Okay.
OK
On, and let me try to share it. Okay. Thank you very much. It's my great honor to present again here in our global forum of human settlement. I will talk about how to use bioplastics and biomaterial to reduce the waste. In the past, we have used 3R, reduce, reuse, and recycle, even try to ban all the plastic application. But I'm proposing to use another 3, add 3 R's, 3 new R's, replacement by bioplastic, regulation, and research to solve the problem. Yesterday, we heard a lot of discussion about greenhouse gas, global warming, and the sea level increasement. We know China is the largest CO2 producer in the world, but we're making the commitment to reduce it. Another major problem, as we know, is plastic pollution, which is already in the sea, will last for 300 to 500 years and cause a lot of damage to the nature and the wild animals. And this plastic are breaking down into microplastics. It's in the sea, in the food chain, in the air, and start to enter into human lung, blood, even the fetus. Is causing a lot of problems. So in the past, we try to burn it, incinerate it, dump it, or even ship it to from well-developed country to underdeveloping countries, but that has been stopped and must be stopped. The 3 R's are very nice: reduce, reuse, recycle. We'll continue to do it, but the fact is we only in the past only recycled 14%. And incinerated another 14%, no more than 30% has been truly removed. We still have lots of bioplastic waste in the field. So UN and the EU has been trying to ban all single-use plastic if possible. You can see the major announcement from EU. But is that realistic? Can we, for example, can we truly stop using mineral water bottles, which are a must to survive in underdeveloping country? So I have the great honor in exactly this Global Forum of Human Settlement Conference 2018 in Thailand, propose another R, replacement by bioplastic and biomaterials. The concept of this bioplastic including 2 different concepts. One is bio-based, which can reduce the CO2 emission, but may or may not to be biodegradable. Another one is a biodegradable plastic, which can come from the fossil-based traditional plastic, which is much cheaper. And for those happen to be also biodegradable one, are much in smaller scale, much more expensive and much weaker. So that require heavy duty regulation, which is the 5th R I introduced here, to force people or the society use a more nature environmental friendly bioplastics. For example, in China, we are trying to ban all single-use plastic by 2025 in this common application. And we have already set up a whole bunch of bio-based, biomaterial and bio-based plastic and petroleum-based or semi-bio-based plastic and related industry. Global-wise, is still bio-based plastics such as PLA and PBA, petroleum-based but biodegradable one are still rather small, but more are added. BASF, Novamont, TCP, Total Cobian, NatureWorks, and but China put in much more effort. We are over 300,000 tons now, and we're approaching 3 to 5 million tons of PLA in 2-3 years, and over 10 million tons of PBAT in 2-3 years. PBAT has been used for mush film and trashing bag and the mail order bags. PBS can be semi-bio-based, has been used for food contact packaging. PHA is fermented from sugar, is 100% nature, and can be also easily degrade in marine environment. PPC, which use half of roughly petroleum based, but you can use the off gas from petroleum plant-based plant, chemical plant, or fermentation plant. So it can be bio-based. And PCL, petroleum-based, but fully biodegradable for medical application, toys, and 3D printing. I personally also have produced the James Law, forecast the growth, the market growth, and also the current production facility for PLA. We are at 300,000 tons level now, and we'll soon approach 700,000 tons. So the supply are plenty. Here, the lactic acid supplier, which produce into PLA plant and then into PLA fiber, plus food and drink application. All of these are already commercialized in China for sporting application, desert sand control, cosmetic tea bag, and 3C application and cigarette. Of course, lots of fiber application, including mask, which are dramatically used due to the COVID situation and also cause a loss of pollution in the environment, as we know. EPLA can also replace EPS, which cause dramatic environmental pollution. Here is the industry set up in China, but that requires lots of research. So this is 6R coming. Research, dramatic amount of research are required to improve the characteristic of bioplastics. And we also can combine the bio-based biomaterial with bioplastics, such as coating, PLA coating are used for cups and bowl instead of using PE coating, which will cause a lot of pollution.
Time is up, Professor.
All right.
Unfortunately. Yeah.
Right away.
Yeah.
And a lot of starch application, and also can be blended with bioplastic or too bad there's some fake approach need to be stopped. So there's some future work in China. We need to do more work on end of life application, then build the composting and biogas plant, and use a stronger regulation to ban all this fake bioplastic causing more pollution, and much more research and development to improve the technology and reduce the cost. So China now is falling behind on the environmental protection issue, but it's making great improvement and hoping to set the example because we have only one Earth. So that's the end of my discussion, and hoping feel free to make connection with me by WeChat, and we all work together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Jim, for enlightening us with the gravity of the health impacts of the microplastics, and also several cases of circular economic utilization of the plastics, including the cases in China. And we have taken note that only we are recycling 14% of the total plastic we are generating. And of course, the bioplastics, as you mentioned, gives us a lot of opportunity to explore, but to advance that, and we need also a very strong science policy interface. And microplastics, I think we should not forget that if I share some of the reports like Ellen MacArthur Foundation, 8 million tons of plastics are already in our ocean, and 51 trillion of microplastics are already in our ocean. So the issue is extremely critical. So thank you, Professor James, once again for your contribution. So our next presentation is Dr. Mangesh Gupte. He is actually CEO of the Action Alliance for Recycling Beverage Cartons in India. And he will be speaking on circular economy towards achieving smart, resilient, and sustainable cities, the case of India. Professor, Dr.
Thank you.
Gupte.
Thank you so much, and thank you for this well-organized thought process for this webinar. and this entire meeting. In interest of time, I'll have to rush and jump to write a few quick things. So in the presentation part, I'll not discuss about the India's effort. I'll quickly narrate it in a minute and then move to one of the practical situations where the circular economy solutions are going ahead well and where they are stumbled. And since we are a format specific organization, we have thorough understanding of the circular economy effort where the cities can enable us and where the government of India has enabled, and there are certain things to go ahead further. So just to begin with, India's circular economy effort, especially for cities, the Niti Aayog, the Central Planning Authority of India, has come up with certain white papers. At the same time, the National Resource Efficiency Policy, which is in the draft stage, but it will be released in a short while, has identified 7 key sectors where the circular economy approaches are essential. While it does so, the Invest India arm of Indian government, which is enabling various investments in the country, particularly with the focus on circular economy, as well as enabling a dialogue between cities, the investors, the innovators, and the central government per se, even the state governments, is actively working on Waste to Wealth mission, which is helping the government of helping the country and the cities to come up with the circular economy initiatives. Just to name a few, rather prior to this, I would like to divide this discussion into 3 parts. First is about the policies and the policy related effort, maybe the backup effort, which I mentioned now. I'll also explain you about the EPR effort, which is a big way effort on waste management, but not restricted effort by Government of India. Second is the practices, and the third is the investments part. The practices means the various sectors that have been covered in various circular economy efforts and the role of cities. Now, coming to a certain set of points here, if you look at, there's a huge amount of work that is happening on various, is it presentable here?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
No, the presentation part is not visible. Okay.
Sabrina,
Yeah. Is it visible?
yes, visible.
Yes.
Okay, I'll move to that one. Okay, so prior to I come down, I'll just tell you what ARC is. ARC is basically an alliance of 14 food and beverage industries, which use paper-based beverage cartons.
Could you present in the presenter mode, the full screen?
Oh, okay, yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry. So while I go ahead with the discussion, I'll run through one of the examples and then relate it to the larger effort by cities as well as the country. The case example here, the reason to put a case example here is when and why does a circular economy initiative in a city or multiple cities comes into picture. So I'll give you an example. We are more than a few thousand tons of format, and we are format specific, which is paper-based beverage cartons. Typically, Tetra Pak, SIG, Combibloc, many other companies produce this. So colloquially known as Tetra Pak cartons as well. So as per current law of land, we fall under plastic waste management registration, and all our food and beverage members have done this plastic waste management registration. Till 2021, till the notification, the rules were not in place, we did a fantastic voluntary EPR. We created an ecosystem. We did have our 14 we did have execution of various ecosystem in all major cities in India. Now you can understand that cities in India make a huge population, much bigger than Europe population. So the scale was so big. We trained the waste management agencies, linked them to the recyclers, as well as we invested in the resources, our resources in the recycling, in the recyclers, especially to deal with our kind of waste. Now, why our waste is related to cities and why our waste is related to the better recycling is we are 75% paper fiber. So we can be effectively recycled or upcycled. Now you may understand 2 major things about how our format relates to cities. One is 80% of these kind of products happens in the cities. So you can imagine the waste generation also happens in the cities and peri-urban areas. On the same lines, therefore, the EPR and the waste management also happens in the cities, while majority of the contribution towards EPR does go from the city as well as the brands. Now, our experience, and it is worth sharing also from the policy perspective for the country as well as from the action perspective. Typically, after the rules have come into picture in February 22, we found that there are good things. One is there are 3 types of targets. One is how you collect, how you recycle and reuse the recycled content. So that's a beautiful design of our India's EPR regulation. At the same time, it has been made mandatory that plastic waste processors and PBOs, producers and brand owners, etc., have to do a mandatory registration. So which means the government is able to monitor about 3.4 million tons of plastics moving in the country every year. So the first step, this EPR, you can consider as the first step for the circular economy, where the companies, the industry, as well as the cities are working together. There are certain lessons and learnings, and I would say concerns, because we all, as a global professional set of people, would like to understand that what happens in practice and how still we should be pushing the circular part of the circular economy perspective and design thinking. So coming to the first point is about what kind of enabling policies we need, whether they should, how they should be circular economy centric, and what's the role of cities there. So as of now, the Indian regulation is focused on e-waste, plastics, and few other kind of waste. However, it will be a good idea to bring all other type of waste in the remit. If you count on especially one of the speakers who mentioned about the MSME sectors, I'll give you some examples about it. But largely unorganized and MSME sectors are not a part of this EPR discussion today. Only the major brands have been made a part of it. Now, if you look at how, and it actually shrinks the roles for the cities. See, India's demographics of where the large industry is placed, most of the large industry, I would say 95% of the large industry is placed outside the city jurisdiction. So which means that the production of the waste related material happens outside, waste generation happens in the city, the responsibility lies on the city. Whereas majority of the other type of producers and users are from the SMEs are basically in the cities. So there's a big twinning and linking that has to happen in terms of dialogue. So integration of these both unorganized sector, and typically we all know that the rack picking or waste management agencies operate in the cities, and therefore their availability, their dialogue with the cities are equally important for creating the circular
Dr.
economy.
Gupta, you have just 1 minute left.
Sure. It's just the last slide. Last slide, yeah. Okay. Typically in India, if you look at 45% of the waste generators have not been brought under the ambit of the EPR rules, and therefore the cities are facing the burden that they're producing the particular type of materials, but they are not controllable. Coming to the point on the decentralized waste management, typically the logistic cost of waste have been so tremendous for the cities, and nobody's investing in the O&M cost. Most of them are investing in the CapEx cost. There has to be a great need of neighborhood level decentralization of all the solutions, and even the circular economy interventions may be micro innovative projects. And lastly, if you look at, there are only 7 plastics in India, and there are 100 other categories of waste which are not being notified. If you look at EU is about 100 categories, out of which, let's say the cartons are 84, and the moment you assign a category, there can be a circular economy potential that can be mapped, there can be a plan, and the cities can start expecting from various places. And fortunately, the Constitution of India has given a substantial decentralization and empowerment embedded into it, which the cities can use as a rule to have circular economy potential mapping and plans. Thank you for this.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gupta, for outlining the Indian case of smart cities and circular economy. If we look into the Indian policies and rules and regulations, initiatives, we will see that the smart city programs, the Clean India Mission, and circular economy roadmap of Niti Aayog, which has identified 11 priority areas for circular economy applications, and also the EPR rules and regulations that are in place that you have outlined, all are actually mutually reinforcing, they are interlinked. So, but the question is that we need to achieve greater synergy in all these efforts. So all these initiatives that is led out by the government of India. Thank you so much. So with this one, I would like to invite Professor Sadhan Kumar Ghosh, who is the President, International Society of Waste Management, Air and Water, and also the IPLA, which is a SDG partnership. I suspect he is not with us because he has entered me message before the conference that he may not be with us because of some emergency that he is facing, work-related emergency. So Professor Ghosh, you are not here with us. I think he's not here with us. We can quickly jump into the next presentation in the best interest of the time. Dr. Chen Jianjun, who is actually founder, president of Shenzhen Xingtech Lithium Technology Company of China. He will be talking for 5 minutes about providing safe and precise separation solutions for waste lithium batteries to promote a low carbon circular economy. So, Dr. Chen.
Today, I'm very happy to present to you the topic. I want to talk about providing safe and precise separation of the waste and to provide a global new generation of waste lithium battery safety and accurate separation. Well, first of all, I want to ask you a few questions. On September 22nd of the year 2020, President Xi Jinping announces to adopt more forceful measures to peak our carbon in 2030 and carbon neutrality in 2060. Hello? Hello?
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Yes, thank you.
Yes, do you hear me? Yes. Okay. Okay, please. Okay. And China, from January to October, our cumulative output of power batteries in China was 425.9 GWH, a cumulative increase of 166.5% a year-on-year basis. The cumulative output of lithium O2 batteries was 171.4 GWH, accounting for 40.2% of the total output, and with an increase of 137.9% a year-on-year. And the cumulative output of live PO4 batteries was 254, accounting for 59.7%, with an increase of 190.4% on year-on-year basis. In 2021, I think the output of our power batteries will be 580 GWH, a year-on-year increase of 163, which ranks the top among all the countries in the world. And here is a table. From January 1st of this year to today, our increase of lithium battery also very significant. And a lot of different materials such as lead, coal, and a lot of other materials, they are increasing rapidly. And the price of metal, CO and Ni, they rise very rapidly. And the dismantling and recycling economy of the ternary batteries is also high. So we expect that the scale of lithium battery dismantling and recycling will reach 100 billion yuan in 2030. And in 2022, it is expected to recycle 350,000 tons of waste lithium batteries. And different materials, they have a high percentage of recycling. And please take a look at all this news. We have some disasters created by lithium. We know that there are some remnant power inside the batteries, and they will cause fire, cause a lot of different disasters. And for example, there's in Ganzhou of Jiangxi province, and also in Longgang of Shenzhen, we have a lot of very tragic accidents happened due to the fire of the old lithium batteries. And in Dongguan of Guangdong province this year, also Longhua of Shenzhen, we also see a lot of terrible fires.
As you can see, lithium batteries could be dangerous. In using lithium batteries, we could have a lot of waste batteries. Those waste batteries gotta be handled properly. Look at this page. In September this year, in Yizhong County of Gansu, there was a major fire caused by waste lithium batteries. And in January last year, there was a big fire on a production line for dismembering waste lithium batteries. Again, an explosion occurred at a battery factory in Yunnan. And in June this year, 2.5 tons of salt water for producing batteries, actually 2.5 tons of batteries were soaked in salty water for 7 days. And there was a major fire on one night. So as you can see, in recycling waste lithium batteries, we have had a very messy landscape, and the procedures are not standard. As new energy vehicles boom here in our country, the use of lithium batteries is on the rise, and there are so many waste batteries, waste lithium batteries. We can see those waste lithium batteries pretty much everywhere. And in terms of disposal, payment, and handling of those waste lithium batteries, we gotta have better methods and better standards. We need to have the so-called no fire, no explosion, and no smoke handling technology. So look at this page showing some of the procedures. We could use high temperature. We can have the high temperature clamping method. We can also have the low temperature piercing method and the underwater crushing method, so on and so forth. And all those methods are handled with electricity in the batteries. And then we could use solid water to discharge the batteries, and there is also active discharging methods. However, those methods could have risks. Just now you saw that accident with a battery, with a waste lithium battery soaked in solid water, and that caused a fire. So that's where we come in. Look at this page. We have our facilities for handling waste lithium batteries. And this is a production line for handling about 10,000 tons of waste lithium batteries per year safely and efficiently. To discharge those batteries in solid water could be time-consuming and also very risky. Look at this. If discharging is not complete or not thorough, there could be a very high risk of fire. In our technology, we can ensure effective and efficient discharging. Then we can proceed with clamping and crushing. In that case, there is no risk of fire. The discharging time is very short, and our technology do not generate additional waste. We have a very high recovery rate, and we have a very clear separation between the anode and the cathode. So if we can separate the anode from the cathode in processing or handling, then the risks of fire could be minimized by a large margin. So as you can see here, in terms of recovery, we can recover over 98% of all the aluminum in those waste lithium batteries. As for the other figures, I don't have time to elaborate too much.
Kindly wrap up just 1 minute, yeah.
One more minute. One more minute.
Very, very interesting presentation. Just 1 minute, yeah, please.
So here you can see our core technologies. So our technology can ensure there is no fire in handling and disposing of the Western Eastern batteries. So here, please watch this video to get to know more about what we can do. The video is about to end. Wait a few seconds. So that's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Chen, for this very technical presentation. We all know that there is a worldwide race towards e-vehicles, and the countries should also carefully think while introducing the e-vehicles in the country, they need to also build simultaneously the necessary infrastructure for recycle and disposal of the end-of-life lithium batteries, which are extremely toxic and highly hazardous. You know that what you had shown in course of your presentation. Thank you so much. With this one, we go to the last presentation by Dr. Sunil Herath, who is Associate Professor of Griffith University, Australia. So he will be speaking on circular economy towards reducing e-waste. It's a specific cases and best practices. So Sunil, you have just 7 minutes.
Thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes, please put in the presentation mode.
Sorry, I got something happening here.
Do you need me to show it?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Wait. Sorry. No.
Okay, thank you.
Can you see it? Okay.
Yeah. Okay, sorry about that. So can't change the slide. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about the e-waste situation. So I'll just give a quick introduction to give update on about the e-waste situation, and then talk about some concepts related to the circular economy. So you can see if you look at the generation, we are looking at about 53 million tons of e-waste generated every year. And according to the Global E-Waste Monitor, this is going to double by 2050. And the unfortunate thing is that only 17% of this e-waste is collected and recycled, meaning that we don't know what's happening with the remaining 83%, and it's mostly ending up in open dumps and open areas. And also you can see that our region here is producing quite nearly half the amount of e-waste generated around the world. So it is quite a significant. Next slide, please. So we are looking at why we had to worry about the e-waste situation. When you're talking about the problems, we are also should be looking at the opportunities as well from a circular economy point of view. So you can see that this is again the data coming from the UN report, that there's quite a lot of value in e-waste amounting to $57 billion in 2019, where iron, copper, and gold and aluminium are the highest value materials. So there is a opportunity for here what we call as a above ground mine, because to get these materials below ground, you have to extract them, whereas now we have an opportunity to recover them above ground. Next slide, please. So you can see again in a pictorial form, which I just mentioned, the only 17.4% is recycled and 82% is discharged into the outer environment. Next slide, please. So, so getting into the real point here, looking at the circularity and e-waste. So we have, of course, the reduce and reuse is the first thing we had to do. If you can reuse the electric items, then it's the best way to do or reduce. And if you can't do that, of course, we need to go ahead and do the recycling part, which is the third priority. But even more important is to go upstream and look at how to design and manufacture these electronic products, which is the less toxic material inputs. So that is where the design for environment comes in. And of course, one of the most popular way of managing the e-waste is, of course, the extended producer responsibility, which was mentioned by the previous speaker as well. So the extended producer responsibility means that you are making the producer responsible financially and physically to take back the product. And this is becoming a very popular option for the e-waste. Next slide, please. So there are so many examples around the world on how the EPR is implemented. This is one example from Australia, where we have appointed a producer responsibility organization to manage the system. So basically, the producers pay a fee, or the importers pay a fee to the PRO, and the PRO then distributes that fee to the recycling companies to properly recycle. So this is much better than exporting the e-waste into other countries. And next slide, please. And then there is another recent example from Singapore doing the same thing, where they have appointed a producer responsibility organization to manage their e-waste stream. And similarly, there are many examples from India, China, Japan, where they have implemented the EPR. Next slide, please. So, and this is an example from India. The previous speaker mentioned about the circular economy, and there is the EPR regulations is in highly developed in Indian scenario, and it is taking good effect. Next slide, please. So I did a study on how the EPR is implemented, and we can divide the implementation into three groups. We have the full implementation of EPR regulations in countries like Australia, China, India, and so on. Then we have partial or draft e-waste regulation, EPR regulations, which is some countries are in the process of developing the EPR systems, and this changes overnight. So you can see that Vietnam is in that middle, and as I understand, Vietnam has now developed the full EPR regulations for e-waste. And there are countries where the no EPR regulations are existing at this point of time. So this, which is, we can see that those countries there. So next slide, please. So when you're talking about e-waste, we normally talk about computers and mobile phones, and the previous speaker spoke about the lithium batteries and so on. So the issue of end-of-life vehicles now is being talked about quite a lot. And you can see that over 80 million vehicles are getting into the e-waste waste stream at the moment. And the problem here is that the used vehicles have a lot of materials, precious metals, as well as dangerous metals. So again, this is one of the newer waste streams to e-waste waste stream to discuss and talk about, in addition to solar panels and so on. Next slide, please. So that's an example from Japan. I don't have time to go through a lot, but it depends. Again, the EPR is a way to go in this area where the producers are required to fund the recycling efforts. So next slide, please.
You have 1 minute.
Yeah.
Sunil.
Okay, my alarm went as well.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
then again, this is another example from Korea, where the act of resource recycling and electronic equipment and vehicles deal with the electric ELVs. Next slide, please. So so as a way forward, we need to look at these areas of developing a e-waste management strategy based on circular economy. Also, not only look at the current situation, but we also want to look at ahead and look at the reduction of e-waste, and also to look at how the private sector can get involved in this activity. I think the key issue we have in the region is that how to deal with the informal sector. So I don't much have time to talk about, but there are very good models to look at how the informal sector and the formal sector can combine to achieve the better outcomes, because the informal sector has a lot of weaknesses as well as strengths, and same is the formal sector. So if we can combine the strengths of both sectors, we can get into a win-win situation. So last slide, please. So the final slide, I want to emphasize the importance of whatever we do in this space to connect with the SDGs, because that is necessary to do now. And I have given some examples there where how some of the actions in the e-waste area aligns with the SDG targets. For example, elimination of hazardous substances during production, which is the SDG target 3.9. Design for electric equipment with circularity in mind to prevent e-waste generation, and implementing EPR systems, which is aligned with the SDG 12.5. So that's a quick description of the e-waste scenario, but if you have any questions, I can still discuss. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sunil Harat, for your presentation on e-waste and the challenges and the solutions
adopted. And I will briefly touch upon the methodology. We all know, we have seen all these, that slums are the sources of plastic pollution, and the leakage to the river mostly happens in an area where these are located and they are connected to the drains. So if we look at the chain, supply chain out there, we see the dominance of the informal sector, as well as that we don't have the good treatment and disposal system. And if we try to look at the chain in a particular geographical context, we see how we can map all these hotspots, what type of intervention, and what type of hotspots are these. Everybody pointed out that there are SMEs, which are a major source of these leakage, and what is the mechanism. So down to the particular kind of mapping the geography along with the chain is one of the biggest challenges in a city's context. And it is not only present in India, but it is globally relevant. So what we did was to apply in a particular Indian context, GIS-based fuzzy logic modeling, and then followed by the ground truthing and validation. So
actually, I would like to see you, Amitji, sorry to interrupt. Can you get into the slum areas? Please do not present the conceptual methodologies, that you can share the slides with all the participants. Please get into the slum versus this plastics issue.
Yeah. So if geography, and as well as you see the slums in the context of the geography where these hotspots are located. So when we did the ground truthing and the particular mapping, we found that these are major the outcome. So what we say is the major source of plastic littering and leakage into the drains are slums, and slums are low serviced areas. And it needs the attention of local bodies, urban local bodies, where the service has to be there. We found that EPR is not regularly distributed or in an even way in a particular geography. Even the major brands, the products of the major brands are littered. And then we found that these have to be catered to the system. Then we also find that there is a limited recycling. There is a recycling by cherry picking. Now, what happens to the all the quantities of the waste which cannot be recycled? Somebody has to take care of that, and somebody has to infrastructure for recycling as well as disposal. So, strengthening of the waste management system is very much required in these low serviced areas. Then segregation of the plastics is very much required. EPR has to be evenly distributed across a particular geography, and that should be responsibility. Brand should also see that these are even, and there has to be drivers for recycling of the plastics. There has to be strengthening of the monitoring and evaluation system, and based on the daily and monthly as well as the yearly data. And last of all, I would say that shared responsibility is very important. Brands have come in because of EPR, but also the citizens have to make an effort for making use of or to deliver their responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amitji. I think it is very correct, very true that without upgrading the slums, it will be impossible to achieve the zero waste society, because slums also constitute a major part of many cities in developing countries such as in India. So I was told by the organizer, Christian, that we can overrun for 10 minutes before the next important session, parallel session 2A starts after 10 minutes. So now whatever left time, around 8 minutes plus 10 minutes, so 18 minutes, we can just continue to discuss. I would like to request Sabrina to please put the questions on the screen. I had got some response from few of the panel members today. Professor Agamutu, Professor Dr. Thang from Monre, Vietnam, Government of Vietnam, Dr. Kulban Singh, CEO, Waste Foundation in India, Professor Viswanathan, Asian Institute of Technology, Bangkok, Thailand, and Professor Jin Hui, Executive Director of the Basel Convention Regional Center for Asia Pacific, Tsinghua University, Beijing, PR, China. So we have these questions. I would like to give the floor to some of our panel members to address those who have already expressed their interest to address specific questions. And in fact, not only these questions, you can actually address your comments based on all the presentations made so far today. So with this, I would like to invite Dr. Thang from Min Monre, Minister of Natural Resources and Environment of the Government of Vietnam, to kindly provide his comments on question number 1. Very quickly, so kindly limit your interventions for 2 minutes so that we can cover all the panel members.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mohanty. Yeah, do we hear me?
Yes, very much.
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to sincerely thank to the presenters for the presentation. So I would like to share with you some kind of priority policy solution to be considered by the city and government for promote the 3R and circular economy in the urban development. Firstly, I think that the circular economy should be institutionalized or legalized by law, meaning that the concept or the definition of circular economy, the criteria for the circular economy model, and responsibility of ministry, sector, enterprises in implementation of the circular economy should be regulated. Also, integration of circular economy, of the goals and criteria of circular economy into the development policy and plans of the city and municipality should be regulated. It is very important, as shown by Dr. Sanim, that design for environment or eco-design and EPR mechanism is one of the key policy elements for circular economy and 3R. So this should be taken into consideration for regulation and policy. Many countries we see that already have in place that the law acts and action plan on circular economy, like China, like Japan, EU, and many countries. Secondly, I think that enabling policy should be established This group of enabling policy includes, firstly, it is the incentive policy for promoting the circular economy model, like incentive for land, incentive for tax and capital, like loans and support. Secondly is the economic tools like pay-as-you-through mechanism or modulation fee for EPR system. Thirdly is green finance, which includes the green credit and green bonds for enterprises in promoting the circular economy model. And fourthly is the green consumption or green procurement policy, which through that government will need to promote the consumption of environmentally friendly products, of recycled products, and of green products. So I think that this two group of intervention is very important for any municipality or government.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Tang. I recognize the intervention requested by Dr. Agamuthu. We would like to add your response to the question 1.
Yeah, thank you, Mohandiji.
2 minutes maximum, please.
Okay, no problem. From the various presentations and from my own experience, it is very clear that you cannot achieve zero waste cities by having a standard methodology, because it sort of varies with the different countries and different societies. And there are many examples that has already achieved zero waste cities even before circular economy concept came into play. For example, in Kamikatsu, they actually established waste separation as the main criteria to establish a zero waste city. And in India, for example, in Pune, the informal sector, especially the waste pickers, they actually collected waste door to door and did the waste separation to establish zero waste in Pune. And similarly, we also see in Philippines, in Alaminos, it was established that the education plays a very important role, and to teach them how to do the composting of organic materials, and also to establish zero waste cities, where eventually 88% were able to do the waste separation. And we have an interesting example from Germany to Bingen, where they established a zero waste city by actually imposing wide-ranging tax on single-use plastics, and they were able to achieve the zero waste plastic in that. And very more closer to Malaysia, in Surabaya, for example, we have villages which has established zero waste cities very efficiently and with minimum cost to the government. And those are clear examples. So what we can see is that the challenges faced by the various residents of the cities sort of varies depending on their human behavior and their lifestyle, values, as well as the the kind of waste they are dealing with. So we, as I started by saying, that there is no such thing as a standard methodology to achieve zero waste, but it is achievable through the various methods that different cities have already established. And I would like to suggest that the most important thing to achieve zero waste is to increase the awareness of the participants or the public towards zero waste concept. And this is it is possible to achieve zero waste, like the examples I just gave you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Agamuthu. I recognize the intervention requested by Professor Viswanathan of Asian Institute of Technology, Thailand. So could you kindly combine your response, question number 3 and 4. Question number 4 is in fact very important. What impact would a strategic shift to the circular economy have in terms of achieving the clean water, clean land, clean air, clean ocean?
Okay, thank you very much, Mohanty. Let me start with the question number 3. I hope you can hear me. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
The most important things is when you're trying to promote public-private partnership as part of the circular economy, it is very important. Every successful public-private participation requires a clear understanding, responsibility of public sector and the private sector. The government should not think it is a responsibility of the private sector and pass the bucks, but I think the government sector should make sure they should take care of the responsibility and create a very conducive environment. I think I would like to highlight only one important thing, especially when you start talking about circular economy and bringing public-private sectors. The most important part is bringing financial institutions which will provide funds for these projects. So traditionally, financial institutions are very happy to fund linear economy projects, waste treatment and etc. because they know the risk, they know it works very well. But every time when you're going to talk about circular economy projects, the financial institutions are not very ready to fund any of these projects because circular economy projects are new. There are too much of risk. Very classic example is if you're going to talk about plastic recycling industry, there's too much of risk involved on this. Not only the technology, it's also the marketing. So the financial institutions are not willing to come upfront to fund this private sector project. So that is where the government sector has to play a very important role to bring a conducive environment, take care of the risk, give a sovereign guarantee. This risk can be taken by the government so that the financial institution can provide funding for this type of project. This is the one single most important point I would like to highlight on discussion point number 3. I think considering the time frame, I could tell a lot of success stories on this public-private partnership related to circular economy. But almost all these success projects are related because the government sector supported or created the conducive environment and financial security. Now, let me go to the last part, what impact would the strategic shift on circular economy going to create? I can think about two things. One is the technology. What type of technology we're going to adopt in waste management. So for example, traditionally on waste management, we have been working on a simple technology which looks at linear approach. For example, if you have an organic waste, we will go for a simple waste treatment like an activate sludge process, which is an aerobic process. But when you're talking about a circular economy, we might have to go, or we will be going something like an anaerobic process where energy could be recovered, but which is going to have a total different shift and different technology selection, different criteria. That type of technology selection will be moved from conventional thinking to a circular thinking. Second thing is I strongly feel this shift both land and water environment, we might be having technology to a large extent related to artificial intelligence. This type of new technology will play a very important role, and this is what will gear or move towards a strategic shift in a circular economy. I think I'll stop at this point.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Bisu, for your kind considerations to stop there. And we have two panelists actually. We need to do some justice for them. We have Dr. Kulwant Singh, CEO, and Professor Jinwoo Lee from the Basel Conference Research Center from China. So can I divide your interventions just 2 minutes each, and 1 minute left out for me? So Professor, first, Dr. Kulwant Singh, maximum 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mohanty. Am I audible?
Yes, audible. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Now, in fact, the first question, which is most important in one sense to realize the zero waste cities, I think there is a growing and felt need for this in many of our cities, very particularly because there are no landfill sites available anymore. And therefore, many of the municipalities in particular are trying to adopt the concept of zero waste, making their cities zero waste by, I would say, first of all, they are going neighborhood by neighborhood, ensuring that there is no waste that comes out of that. They are trying that the waste actually is, managed right at the neighborhood level or even at the market level, etc., etc. Best examples are there are 5, areas or wards in New Delhi Municipal Council, which for the last 2 years are actually zero waste. There is no waste, not a drop that goes out of that. So I'm just trying to say there are some other cities also, they are actually having a problem because there are no landfill sites. They are also therefore forcibly developing public-private partnerships in this regard, because as a matter of fact, municipalities themselves cannot really, take all the responsibilities for want of the finances, which are very, very lacking, and the second is that in most of the things, the skills are also not there. Therefore, they are actually having a kind of public-private partnership in particularly the dry waste that come out, variety of dry waste, and they are trying to build up the partnerships. Also, very importantly, the concept is really catching up, in most of the bigger cities in particular, because bigger cities are having very difficult situation and scenario. So therefore, the focus is mainly, as far as possible, to have 100% recycling rate to reach that level. Of course, they have not reached it, but they are trying to reach that level.
Yes, Dr. Kulwant Singh, yes, your time is up. Thank you so much.
Okay.
So thank you so much for your intervention, giving the examples of the Indian cities and with the landfill sites. And I would now like to request Professor Jinyu Lee of PR China. 2 minutes you have, Professor Lee. Professor Lee, you are with us? Please unmute. I saw him, actually, he was with us.
Maybe he left because the time is past.
Yes, unfortunately, yes, it's a very rush. So we have just 2 minutes left before participants get into the next parallel session, which starts exactly in next 2 minutes. So let me just quickly express our deep appreciation and thanks to all the presentators, the panelists, for your very scientific insights towards better policy, better governance, to integrate 3R and circular economy in overall policy planning and development. We discuss a range of means for achieving the zero waste societies. That is what this session aims for. So Dr. Thang was telling the circular economy should be institutionalized. So this is very fundamental. So that brings into account the horizontal cooperation between the line ministries, Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Industry, Ministry of Works, Ministry of Tourism, Trade, Commerce, etc. And also the vertical cooperation between the central government agencies and the city, municipalities, city authorities. That means the national policies could effectively trickle down to the local development strategies, etc. So we were also, Professor Bisu was also raising the various partnerships, extremely critical, public-private partnership, the triangular cooperation, the government, scientific and research institutions, and the private sector. And he was also critically raising the financing of circular economy. This is very challenging. He was citing the example of how the financing institutions, investors, have a biasness towards this nillion economy because circular economy projects are new and there is too much risk with regard to the financing of circular economy projects. EPR, green financing, green procurement, and many other elements were also discussed. And we had an excellent case of very technical presentations from China, how to deal with the very highly hazardous and toxic lithium batteries, which are predominantly used nowadays in the e-vehicles. And the governments need to take into account the appropriate, the sound and environmental friendly recycling infrastructures to deal with the end of life lithium batteries. So I would like to once again thank the organizer, the GFS Society, the Secretariat. Sabrina, thank you for your kind support. Dr. Haipeng Lu and Miss Christine Hay, all your team, you did an incredible job in organizing this conference.
Thank you. And can we open the camera so that we have good photo?
Okay,
everyone, open
please,
your video. So